It's a quiet morning in the tiny rural community of Burlington County, New Jersey, 2 hours south of New York City.
Workers were actually taking the garbage cans along roadside on Route 72. One of the workers noticed the bag. When he picked it up, it had some weight to it, and he noticed some blood on the bag. When they opened the bag, they discovered a human head. They called us immediately. When I arrived at the scene, first thing you could see, there was a head in the bag. There was blood on the face, and he had like white or gray hair, I remember. His eyes were open. I've seen dead bodies before, but that day was the first time I actually saw dismemberment. There was an upper torso discovered, a left and a right arm, and one of the bags contained intestines. We discovered the lower torso was missing. Both his legs and his lower torso are not at the scene with his upper torso.
Then police get a second panicked call from highway workers 15 miles down the road.
323 to 581.
Authorities do not know if they're responding to a call for the remaining body parts or another murder.
So we went out to the Stafford Forge area, and in the garbage can there was the same bags. Inside the bag, you could see a severed leg. All the trash bags were double bagged, double knotted.
Authorities transport the bags from the two gruesome crime scenes to the state medical examiner's office in Newark.
At the autopsy, you basically put him back together on the table. It was like a puzzle, everything went together.
The cause of death was multiple stab wounds. In this particular case, there was no cutting of the bones. The upper arms were disarticulated from the shoulder joint. It's like cutting and separating the leg off of a chicken without cutting the bone itself. You need to have an understanding of human anatomy to be able to disarticulate a joint.
Investigators learned that Rogers was openly gay and a regular at the Townhouse Bar, the same bar that both Thomas Mulcahy and Peter Anderson were known to have visited.
When somebody's a regular, you start talking to them a lot. He'd be there, I'd say, "Hi, Richard, how you doing?" And I knew his name because he came in a lot.
Richard Rogers was living on Staten Island, very close to the stores where the rubber gloves and the saw were purchased.
Rogers' dark history, his proximity to multiple locations where victims were seen, and the fact that he lives on Staten Island all provide compelling circumstantial evidence.
What type of individual could do a crime like this? And Richard Rogers fit that perfect.
When investigators find out Rogers' profession, they are convinced he is their killer.
He's been working as a nurse for more than 20 years at Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan.
He was a surgical nurse, so he knew how to decapitate an individual with the least amount of resistance. In other words, knowing exactly where to saw.
So all this time, the task force is looking for a male nurse that works at St. Vincent's Hospital. Meanwhile, Richard Rogers never worked at St. Vincent's Hospital, and it appears that he lied to Michael Sequeira about where he worked. Investigators obtain Richard Rogers' work records and discovered that for each date of each murder, Richard Rogers was off from work. That was one of my favorite pieces of evidence.
The team comes up with a plan to get Rogers in custody.
They have to be cautious. They don't know what to expect. They have to be ready for any contingency. The police meet Richard Rogers at Mount Sinai Hospital and give him the impression they want to converse with him concerning him being the victim of a credit card fraud. He goes with them willingly without issue. just after midnight on May 28, 2001. They tell him they're investigating a homicide of 4 gay men out of New York City. The detectives advised him that there was evidence to trace back to Staten Island. And as well as him being the last person to be seen with Michael Sakarob, he had been sitting with his hands on his knees and his feet on the floor. Once he was confronted, he then changed to a defensive posture. He started sweating. He was acting extremely nervous and worried.
Rogers admits to knowing victim Michael Sakarob. He then asks for a lawyer.
He didn't make any admission in regards to the homicides.
Without a confession, investigators decide to search Rogers' home in hopes of finding evidence that will link him to the murders.
We secured a search warrant for the residence of Richard Rogers. I gotta say, that was probably the neatest, cleanest residence I've been in. He actually vacuumed in rows. You look back on the case, everything was clean. All the cuts were clean, disarticulated. The body was drained of all blood. Things are starting to come together. We found the same shopping bags we found with Thomas Mulcahy's body parts in it. We did come across some sedatives. We did believe that Rogers was giving these sedatives to individuals he brings back to his house, either knock them out or render them to the point where he can, overcome them. We opened up a drawer and we saw some Polaroid pictures in there. As soon as we looked at them, everyone was shocked.